Imagine not being able to travel where you want, not because you lack time or money, but because your government won't allow it. That's what it was like for citizens of the GDR for 40 years. We'll introduce you to two people who risked their lives for freedom.
I just didn't want them to shoot me.
And we'll meet a historian who interviewed soldiers ordered to patrol those borders.
And he said, we were there to be seen. We were just sitting there in the big patrol boat to send the message, you know, we're here, we're watching.
Why did more than 5,000 people risk everything? How the GDR tried to control the sea? And why a skin cream could be the difference between hope and failure. That's all coming up in this video. The Baltic Sea, a beloved destination and symbol of summer fun and idyllic holidays. But it also marked the northern border of East Germany, which kept 17 million people locked up under an unjust regime. Hope Harrison from the US has researched this dark past for decades.
It was such a strange situation to have simultaneously the beauty and the sense of freedom and openness and fun. But that water could also be deadly if you tried to escape across it.
The sea was a tempting but perilous possibility for those wanting to leave the country.
At 14, I knew I wasn't going to stay there.
As you got older, you felt the pressure and the coercion more and more. It became more apparent.
But how did this unjust regime come to be? After World War II, Germany was divided among the Allied forces. In the Soviet-occupied zone, the German Democratic Republic was established, modeled on the Soviet Union. It quickly became clear that building that kind of state would not function without force. The Socialist Unity Party, or SED, regulated nearly everything in people's lives. But anyone who had other plans soon ran into trouble.
It depended how far you wanted to spread your wings. You know, if you didn't really care, you were fine. For other people, they always felt this bittersweetness because they couldn't separate it. They couldn't suppress that feeling. Here's something coming to an end also, and I'm being told I can't go beyond this. And I can't see what's over the horizon and where these ferries are going to.
Even as a child, Annette Kempfer rebelled. She didn't want to join the Young Pioneers, the GDR's youth organization, or swear allegiance to the state.
I had absolutely no future prospects, no freedom to develop myself, no freedom of speech, no freedom to be critical or say what I didn't like. None of that was possible. And every single day I was bombarded with slogans supporting socialism, world peace, the party. No.
No freedom to travel, limited career opportunities, constant surveillance through the Stasi. More than 2 million people did not want to live under those conditions and left the GDR for the West. To stop that exodus of workers needed to build the socialist state, in 1961 the SED began building the Berlin Wall, which soon became the symbol of a divided Germany. But it didn't stop people's longing for freedom, and they sought new ways to leave. A wave of dangerous escape attempts shows how desperate people were, turning to homemade hot air balloons, small aircraft, tunnels dug in secret.
Durch solche Fluchtstollen unter der Mauer gelangten ganze Familien in die Freiheit.
Some had themselves welded inside car bodies. Over the following decades, some 5,000 people were able to escape across the Berlin Wall.
There were these escape helpers who smuggled people across the border in the trunk of their car. Getting involved with someone was risky. You never knew if it was a Stasi trap. And there were lots of horror stories about jumping over the wall.
At least 140 people were killed trying to cross the wall, either shot by border guards or dying during other risky escape attempts. Musician Eberhard Klunker wanted to leave the country. He was forced to make music according to government guidelines and had no contact with the international music scene. As a conscientious objector, he was already on the Stasi's radar. While out fishing, he came up with a plan. The Baltic Sea coastline in the north of the GDR was just under 600 kilometers long, an invisible border with no fence or wall. Between 20 and 40 kilometers of water separated it from the west, Denmark and West Germany. The lighthouse of the West German resort town of Dahme was within sight, a flashing greeting from freedom.
It seemed closer than it was. I could see the lighthouse at Dahme, and it was so powerful for me to feel, oh, this is what they were striving for. This is why it seems so easy. If I can see it, how far can it be? I've got to be able to get there.
That's also what 18-year-old Annette Kempfer thought. She told no one, not even her mother, so they would not be implicated. She traveled by train and bus to the town of Bornhak, planning to swim to the west.
I had a swimming cap with my passport tucked inside, so I could prove who I was when I got across. And I also had some machine grease to protect my skin from the water. That was my whole plan.
In 1975, 11 years earlier, Eberhard Klunker and his bandmate Olaf Wegener had gone to the island of Pole with a folded-up inflatable boat in a backpack. They had oars in a case for fishing poles. Here on the coast, swimming after dark or even being on the beach at night was forbidden. Everyone on holiday here was closely monitored. A border brigade consisting of thousands of soldiers patrolled the coast, using radar and ships for hunting and clearing mines.
So there were guard towers. At night, there were pairs of soldiers patrolling the beach with Kalashnikovs and searchlights.
Scheinwerfer einschalten. Gelände absuchen.
Massively strong searchlights developed by the Soviets, which were actually used in World War II to shine lights on planes to make it hard for planes to fly and maybe to crash.
4,500 would-be escapees were arrested on the water or while still on land. When Annette Kempfer arrived on the beach, carefully smeared in machine grease against the cold water, a patrol showed up.
I knew you weren't allowed on the beach after 10 p.m, but I didn't know they'd actually patrol the beach. They came with guard dogs and walked along the beach in a line. And there I was, sitting in a basket chair, already covered in the grease with my swimsuit on. I thought, this is it. It's over. I'm not even in the water, and it's over. My heart was racing. I was sitting right there in the basket chair. I pulled my feet up so they wouldn't see me, but then the dogs didn't notice me because I'd covered myself in the grease, and they walked right past me.
Officially, these soldiers were trained to secure the border against attacks from foreign enemies, as this training film shows.
Tag für Tag, Nacht für Nacht schützen die Grenzsoldaten der Nationalen Volksarmee das Grenzgebiet vor allen Anschlägen des Gegners.
Sperrabschnitt 12 ausgelöst. Überprüfen Sie die Auslösung.
Zu Befehl. Habe verstanden. Überprüfe Auslösung.
They were sort of shocked to find out that actually the main goal was to make sure nobody escaped. And so many of them talked about how they just hoped to God that nobody tried on their watch.
Annette Kempfer made her move, slipping into the water in the darkness.
The water was so cold that my teeth were chattering. It felt like the whole town of Bornhak could hear my teeth chattering. And you can't stop it. For anyone who never experienced it, you can't stop it.
In between two patrols, Eberhard Klunker and his friend quickly inflated their dinghy, which had no metal parts, in order to evade the Stasi's radar.
The whole time we didn't panic, we weren't afraid. It was just row, row, row. Stopping was no longer an option. We couldn't switch places either, because although Olaf was stronger than me, I was a better rower. And if we tried to switch positions, the boat might have capsized.
What followed were 16 hours in unchanging positions, using a small compass and the stars to navigate and avoid the huge ferries crossing their path on the open sea.
We had to cross this shipping route. It was dangerous. There were these huge things, as tall as a 5-story building, and we were so small they didn't even notice us.
Some 900 people escaped the GDR this way, using outboard motors, a homemade submarine, an inflatable mattress, or by swimming. But fishermen repeatedly found dead bodies in their nets and corpses washed up on the shore. The GDR used these deaths as deterrents, calling them victims of imperialism's ideological diversion. At least 135 people died trying to escape by sea, but the exact number is unknown.
I really enjoyed the sunrise. I took a moment because I knew I'd never experience something like that again. And then I thought, where am I actually? How far have I come? I realized I'd made it about halfway. If a West German fishing boat had come along, I'd have welcomed it. But no fishing boat came. Unfortunately, nothing passed by at all.
The current was strong and robbed Annette Kämpfer of her last bit of strength. She gave up on the open sea. An approaching border patrol was her only hope of survival.
I just didn't want them to shoot me. I wanted them to see that I was a helpless person in the water and get me out.
An hour later, the East German Coast Guard found Annette suffering from hypothermia.
They were really kind. 2 young guys. I heard one of them saying, "Come on, kid, what are you doing? That's so dangerous." Something kind like that. Then I passed out.
Later, she would read in her Stasi file that she had given up just a few meters from the border. Maps in the GDR were manipulated and inaccurate, making the sea seem insurmountable. Eberhard Klunker was surprised when Dahme appeared sooner than expected on the horizon.
My friend Olaf was facing in the direction we were going. He had a beard and always looked a little grumpy. Then, all of a sudden, his face completely lit up. He could actually see land, the land of milk and honey, the place we'd been trying to reach. That was it. There was this advertising balloon with Nivea printed on it. I said, let's look closer, if it says Florena instead. That was the East German skin cream at the time. Then we'd better paddle the other way.
It said Nivea. They were frozen with hands bloodied by hours of rowing. Their next stops were the police station, a hospital, then a refugee camp in West Berlin.
They often needed to first go to some sort of refugee camp to be questioned. The West Germans always wanted to be sure this was a real refugee and this wasn't somebody from the Stasi sneaking in and wanting to find things out. But East Germans were recognized as West German citizens right away.
But Annette Kämpfer was imprisoned in Rostock for trying to flee the GDR, punishable with several years in jail.
The prisons were full of young women who'd wanted to get out. I had no idea. This was 1986. I thought I was the only one. But there were so many others. People who tried swimming across the Baltic, people in boats that capsized, people sealed inside cars. All these incredible stories.
After 10 months, her freedom was bought by the West German government, a common deal made so the GDR could acquire hard currency. Finally, she too was free. 2 years later, after a peaceful revolution, the Berlin Wall fell. The borders were open. Then Germany was reunited and the GDR ceased to exist. Eberhard Klunker was able to live out his dreams of being a musician. He's still affected by his spectacular escape.
Someone recently gave me a book about failed escape attempts across the Baltic Sea. When I look at those young people, they could have been my classmates or my friends, people whose dreams ended in such a terrible way. It really moved me. Looking back over all these decades, I think I probably underestimated just how dangerous it really was, and how incredibly lucky we were.
What would you have done? Would you risk everything for freedom?